Hi everyone, it's Nicole from NicoleBudgel.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to make a card that features two items from the Celebration 2015, the Simply Wonderful stamp set and the Irresistibly Yours designer series paper. I'm going to start with the birds in a nest stamp from the stamp set World of Dreams. Using a scrap piece of Whisper White cardstock, I stamped the image using Versamark, making sure to use the Embossing Buddy first. I took one of the square framelits and placed it above the area that I stamped in. I used this as a guide as I wanted to make sure the birds were in the middle of the area that I'm going to cut out. I then used black embossing powder and heated it with my embossing tool until it turned shiny. Next, I took the Squares collection framelits. I labeled mine from 1 to 7 with the smallest square being number 1. I took framelit number 3, which measures 2 by 2 inches, centered it around the birds, and cut it out using my Big Shot. I left the image inside of the framelit for this technique. I used Tempting Turquoise and with a small sponge, sponged around the birds, leaving a small area of white in the middle. I sponged very lightly here. I didn't want any harsh lines to be apparent on the image. Leaving the framelit in place like this while you're sponging will leave a small white border around your image. I glued the image to a black mat measuring 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. Next, I took a square of 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 of the Irresistibly Yours designer series paper. This paper comes as two 12 by 12 sheets of 6 different designs. What makes this paper unique is that there is a design pre-embossed on one side and you can color it however you wish. I chose Brayering and Tempting Turquoise Ink to ink up the Brayer. Roll the Brayer in one direction only. Lift it, bring it back to the starting point, and ink it up again. This will cover the entire Brayer evenly. To avoid lines or streaks, especially for this project, roll the Brayer in only one direction. Re-ink the Brayer and roll again. It doesn't matter which way you roll, as long as it's just in one direction. Next, take a cloth or a paper towel and rub the ink off of the embossed portion. The ink looks dark here, but it dries a lot lighter. I have to say I absolutely love this paper and I really hope Stampin' Up! Brings more paper like this into the new catalog in June, as this paper is only available until March 31st of 2015. Next, I took a piece of Whisper White cardstock measuring 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. I laid it in a landscape position and used my Simply Scored scoring tool. I laid the designer series paper that I just embossed on top, and using it as a guide, I scored 2 lines onto the paper. This gave me a nice and simple embellishment without having to use ribbon. Here is where I made a slight error. I should have stamped my sentiment onto the card at this point, for I had completely forgotten to do it until I had attached all of the layers together. So using Snail, I attached the 3 1/2 by 4 3/4 Whisper White piece and adhered it to a black mat measuring 3 3/4 by 5. Then I took the designer series paper and I adhered it to the upper portion of the card, ensuring the scored lines were showing below. I like to flip my cards over and rub the back to ensure good adhesion. This way I won't get any ink on my hands in case it was still wet. The card base is cut at 5.5 by 8.5 and scored at 4.25, and the color again is Tempting Turquoise. Burnish your fold with a bone folder and glue your panel to the card base. Flip the card over and again press firmly to ensure proper adhesion. Like I said earlier, if I had to do it over, I would stamp the sentiment before gluing the white panel to the black mat. I used the Your Simply Wonderful stamp from the Celebration 2015 Simply Wonderful stamp set, and to tie it in with the focal image, I again used black embossing powder. I attached dimensionals onto the back of the focal image and adhered it to the middle of the designer series paper. 2 pearls, one on each side of the sentiment, finishes this card. So simple, yet so effective. Thanks for joining me today. Take care, everyone.